Most people remember Neon Genesis Evangelion for being the show that started it all when it came to mechs. Of course, there were others like the Gundam series, but this was one of those ones that was so impressive because it had so many connections to the Christian theology, even though it was simply because it looked cool to the creators. At the same time, the frames were drawn by hand, and it still stands the test of time and has several movies rebooted to show updated graphics and even alternative endings to the storyline. Today, we're going to focus on a specific segment of it being the greatest last stand that the show had to offer, and arguably one of the greatest last stands in anime of all time ever. In the end of Evangelion, we understand that Shinji has a complicated relationship with his father, Gendo Ikari. He is also being expected to pilot a mech that is also imbued with his mother's being in existence, which makes it a little bit more than a mech because it's partially sentient, meaning that it will even go as far as to attempt to protect him when he is in peril or go berserk when he is in danger. But in this last stand, it exists because Shinji allowed it to. Shinji was refusing to pilot Eva 01. This led to Asuka having to fight the JSSDF and, more importantly, the mass production Eva series, aka Eva's 5 through 13. This was problematic not just because they were other mechs, but because they were mass produced, meaning they all had updated specs and there were 9 of them. But of course, Asuka, just like Mr. Kakashi never duck a fade Hatake, she was about that action. So she stood up and got ready to run the fade. They fly overhead attached to these machines that served as gliders for the mechs before they all descended and grew wings out of their backs. The main difference between these Evas compared to the ones that had already been piloted by Shinji and company was the fact that these ones didn't have faces, shall we say. And by faces, I mean eyeballs or noses. These looked like weird naked mole rats. All they had was teeth, and they were fiending for a snack. And the only thing in sight was everybody's favorite ginger German, Asuka. Now, it's important to recognize that previous to her having to face off against these monstrosities, she had to face off against the JSSDF forces, which included numerous floating helicopters with the firepower to take down entire nations darn near. We get a pan to a room with all the SEAL members of the council that planned on dropping the Evas in to take control of the base and all research materials within it. As they blocked out the sun and invoked their wings, we realized that these weren't about to be as easy to defeat as the angels. These were something else entirely, and you could see it in the shock on Asuka's face as they circled around her Eva. Mind you, she had removed the power cord from her own Eva when she was fighting the JSSDF. And those that know Evangelion know that you need your wires intact in order to use your machine beyond a specific limited amount of time. Once the mass-produced Evas landed, things got serious. Their wings all shrunk back into their bodies, and they got ready to chow down on the unsuspecting Asuka. Meanwhile, you had Misato trying to drag Shinji all the way back to the base so that he could get into the Eva 01 and help Asuka fend off and protect everybody in the settlement. Her recognizing that she had less than 4 minutes to get the job done, stanced up and got ready to run the feint in the meantime. Lunging at one, she grabs its head and breaks its jaw open before jumping completely over it and grabbing both the top and lower half and twisting it until it ripped open.
Meanwhile, Shinji,
within the settlement, was being dragged along by Misato while JSSDF officers fired rounds at them from a stairwell below. After they get through the blast doors, Shinji looks over at Misato and realizes that she's been hit and she's running out of time. But she can't go out that way, and she needs to figure out some way to spur him into action because, as we know, Shinji's a pansy. They stand by the elevator and she preps to send him up, but before she sends him, she gives him a goodbye kiss, which is widely debated by the anime community as being one of those rather suspiciously concerning moments of adult and child relationship, shall we say. But if you grew up like I did, every fiber in your body would have been tingling when Misato grabbed your face just like she did Shinji's and leaned in after giving her motivational speech to seal the deal. One long and lasting kiss, and she shoves him into the elevator only to send him off to finish the mission. But as soon as the elevator door closed, she slumped down from leaning against it and died on the floor. Shinji sat in the elevator, wiping blood off his face, realizing that she was most likely deceased by the time he would reach the top of the elevator. He then has a complete mental breakdown as if he wasn't already doing terrible enough, and then we get a pan back to Asuka, who's still running the fade with more of the mass production Evas. She takes out a razor blade and puts it through one's jaw after slamming it into the water of the lake nearby and moves on to another. Realizing time is of the essence, she charges in with a battle cry like no other, rips off its arm with the razor blade, and gets ready to put in more pain. She puts it on the floor and realizes that her razor blade has no more length to stab with, and as she looks at the wrist of her Eva, the head of her Eva gets grabbed by the mass production edition that she was planning on putting out of commission. Just then she sees a shadow overhead and realizes she has to get active on another Eva that jumped airborne to put in work. It misses on the down slam with the giant sword, and she grabs a nearby one that was planted in an attempt to help defend herself. We get a pan back to Shinji, and he's standing inside of the Eva 01 hangar, realizing that the protective gel was now all throughout the facility. Outside, we still have Asuka fighting for her very life, while Gendo Ikari and Rei Ayanami are down underneath the facility with the doctor trying to figure out what to do next. We pan back to Asuka up top, and she's fighting one after one after one against all of the mass production Evas that remained, fending them off slowly until one jumps on top of her. But she had a trick up her sleeve. She ejects spikes out of the top of her Eva's head into the dome of the mass production edition that had been salivating over her machine. Asuka continues to fight, running out of time and recognizing that there's very little she can do in her current situation. But she's not one to give up, so she slams one Eva through a building and then takes it out to throw it into the next one to disorient it. She then throws complete haymakers, putting a hand in between both of them and attempting to destroy a core. With only 14 seconds left on the clock, she squeezes harder than ever, and you see the tongue dangling out of the one mass production Eva's mouth as it realizes it's getting very critical out here. Just then she realizes that a sword is being thrown at her, and she ends up using her AT field in order to protect herself. But as it makes a connection, it turns into the Spear of Longinus and stabs straight through her AT field and into the head of her Eva. Just then the power goes out and Eva 02 is no more. We see inside the cockpit as she screams and cries, pulling on the controls, begging for it to move, but it will not. There is nothing she could do. Inside the control tower, they realize how desperate the situation is and recognize that there's nothing left to be done. And then something peculiar happens. Outside, we see all the Evas that she had previously destroyed all rising once again, with evil grimaces, drooling jaws, and jagged teeth, slowly reanimating, rising from the dead. They all grow wings once again and take to the sky to finish her off. They all grin like a band of hooligans ready to do no good, and then dive bomb on her, slowly chewing and chewing and chewing away at the guts of her Eva, and there's nothing that she could do about it. They were cannibalizing the Eva, and honestly, it was extremely hard to watch. So much so that the people inside of the office couldn't take it anymore and had to turn away from the screen. And the worst part was, the entire time, Asuka felt the pain of her Eva because she was still neurolinked to all of its pain receptors. In her final fit of rage, she reaches out to the sky, more angry than she had ever been before, going into a state of darn near psychosis as they flew overhead like buzzards after tearing out her guts. But no matter what she reached for, there would be nothing seen in her grasp, except for death.
I usually don't speak on shit like this.
As all 9 of the mass production Eva units threw their swords down at her and shattered her Eva to bits under the pressure of their sharpened blades. If you made it this far in the video, smash that like button, subscribe, and turn on post notifications, and let me know what video you want to see next. And as always, YC, what you got for me?